Hey, good morning again. You can't see me, but I'm here. It's a surprise. Should have came out like that. Good morning, man. How's everybody feeling? You guys doing okay? How about this side? You guys doing all right over here? How about this side over here? You want one more chance? How about you guys over here? How about the center group? I guess that's a no. You guys might have picked a side. That's cool. I'll take that. Man, good morning. Good to see you guys. Glad you guys are here with us this morning. So good to see you. First, before we get started, last week was Pastor's Appreciation Sunday, and so I didn't speak, but I was here, and you guys just showered us with cards and gifts and little notes. There was a book with all the notes that were in there, and just to let you know, Lori and I, our hearts are totally full of gratitude and appreciation, and our love tanks are full to the brim. And so I just wanted to thank you guys for all that you did. All the speakers that were up here and spoke, didn't they do a fantastic job? They did an amazing job. Patrick's line, that was the first time Pastor Chris knocked some sense into me. That was genius. I thought, man, that was beautiful. Whoever is teaching you how to speak is doing a really great job. Thumbs up, Pat. They did a really great job. So thank you guys for pitching in, for the church, for loving us, for allowing us to be your pastors. All the time I stand backstage and I think, do they really know that I'm coming back out every Sunday? Like, do they really realize that it's me? Are they waiting for like someone better to come out, or do they still, they still have me? And I come out and you're here every Sunday. So thank you for coming back and allowing me to stand on the stage and be your pastor. I appreciate that. I want to give a shout out to everybody who's listening and watching out there in Facebook Live land or on the site or on the podcast, and also everyone in the room. Thank you all for being here, but especially those that are our guests this morning. This is your first time with us. Thank you so much for being here and investing this time to be a part of this. We always say welcome home because Epic is really a family, and we hope that you feel that way this morning. We don't want to be that cult-like church that every time you turn around, somebody's like, hey, I'm glad you're here, wow, but we also don't want to be that place that just completely ignores you and pretends like you're not here, because we really do. We're glad that you're here, and we hope that you feel like this is home and it's a family and a place that you can put some roots down and build some relationships. So can we all just put our hands together and say good morning to all our guests, everybody watching, listening, and everybody out there. You picked a fantastic Sunday. If this is your first day with us, you picked a great day because we get to kick off a brand new series this morning called Heaven. And for the next few weeks, we're going to be digging into this idea of what happens after this life is over. I mean, because that's a pretty big question, right? What happens when I die? What happens when my loved ones die? We all think about this usually at funerals because we're confronted with death, the end of life, the cessation of this life causes us to think, well, what happened to that person? And we don't know until we die. And then when we die, we can't go back and tell other people what just happened to us. Some people say they did, and hey, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, but I haven't died, and I haven't come back to tell you guys, so I'm on this side of death. I mean, it's a question that we all have. Ben Franklin said, nothing can be certain but death and taxes. We know that those things are coming. If you're American, you know what I'm talking about. Taxes is a very real thing. There's a quote that is unknown. We don't know where it came from, but it says, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. Ain't that the truth, This is an interesting topic for us to have, but what is it about? Is it going to be pleasant when we cross from this life into the next? And so for the next few weeks, we're going to look at this idea, this concept of heaven. And if you don't remember anything else through the series, if you don't remember anything else I say today, I want you to remember this. Heaven is more real than you know, and you'll find out sooner than you think. That should either scare you or give you a little joy in your heart. Heaven is more real than you know, and each of us will find out a lot sooner than we think we will. This life, though it seems we have many years ahead of us, none of them are promised. Not a minute is promised to us. Some of us may not make it till next Sunday. Some of us may make it another 100 years with the way that technology is going. I may be a robot, half robot by the time I get that old, and I may still be around here, but we don't know. So heaven is a real thing for us, and it's ahead of us, and we will find out probably sooner than we have imagined or or planned. Today, I want to kick off this series by framing our discussion on this idea of heaven, because it's a lofty topic. There's some scriptures, especially towards the end of our Bible and Revelation, that are really strange. They talk about all kinds of weird beasts and animals and stuff that's happening in heaven that's really difficult for us to comprehend. And so heaven is a very lofty topic. Well, today I want to frame our discussion before we actually get into what's happening in heaven, what it looks like, what's going on there. I want to talk about it from this side of death. I want to talk about it on this side of heaven, how we are to live. Because we should be asking the question, okay, before I get there, is there anything that I need to know? Or any things that I need to understand? Like, do I need my passport? Should I take that with me? Should I keep my organs? I always think that when I'm at the NVA. Like, hey, should I have these when I go into heaven? Like, can I leave them for other people? Or because you don't want to get there and God's like, come on, man, I put them in your body. Why are you taking them out? Are the things that we need to know before we step into heaven? So I want to frame our discussion over the next few weeks with being on this side of heaven, this side of death, in this part of life. And I want to open it up with a scripture in the book of Hebrews. If you've got a Bible, I encourage you to grab it. The book of Hebrews, where we're going to be in the 11th chapter. If you didn't bring one with you today, we have some around. Or you can follow along with us on the screen. Hebrews chapter 11 is where we're going to be. And we're going to start right at the first verse and kind of skip down into 13, 14, 15. We'll be mostly in this chapter, in this entire chapter, most of the day today. Hebrews chapter 11. We don't know who wrote the book of Hebrews. It's probably Paul, because he pretty much wrote everything. But there are little nuances in here that don't seem like Paul. But we do know that it was specifically written to a Jewish audience. Why it's called Hebrews, the letter to the Hebrews. And we believe they're living in Italy, actually. They're not in Jerusalem. They're in a foreign country. And so the 11th chapter, it's known as the faith chapter. If you grew up in church, you've probably heard this before. But there's something woven into these stories of faith that I think points to heaven, and we're going to learn a lot this morning. So here we go. Hebrews chapter 11, start at the first verse, and then we'll skip down. He says, "Now faith is confidence in what we hope for, and assurance about what we do not see." This is the definition that we have about faith. It's a confidence, a hope, an assurance in things that we can't quite see yet. I believe that it exists, and I'm confident that it's out there, though I can't see it. That's what faith really is. And then he continues in the second verse, "This is what the ancients were commended for." And then he starts to go down, and all the ancients, the patriarchs and the matriarchs of the faith, and list them one at a time and all the great things that they had done. Verse 13, he says, all of these people, Abraham and Isaac and David and the amazing people of the Old Testament, all these people, they were still living by faith when they died. And they didn't receive the things that had been promised. And they only saw them and welcomed them from a distance. There's going to be a theme here. From a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on earth. People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of a country that they had left, they would have had an opportunity to return. Instead, they were longing for a better country. Not a physical one, but a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. Let's pray this morning as we get in. God, thank you so much for your word. Thank you so much for your hand on our life and what you've already been doing in the service today, the hearts that you've opened to you. God, thank you that we can hand our things to you. You're strong enough, wise enough, majestic enough to handle them. God, I pray that you open our hearts and our ears to hear what you're saying to us this morning so that we can live for you and allow you to speak to us and know you today. We pray it all in Jesus' name. And everybody said, amen. My in-laws, Lori's family, are from Trinidad. Anybody know where Trinidad is? Trinidad is an island in the south of the Caribbean islands, the Caribbean, depending on where you come from. It's a nice island, Trinidad and Tobago, all the way down just north of South America. It's a beautiful island. It's a mixture of people. There are Indians there. There are Africans, Portuguese, Spanish. It's a melting pot of people. And so the food that is there is sort of a melting pot also. They have Spanish food, and they have a lot of Indian-inspired dishes also. So when I got married, I had to learn how to eat curry. Anybody a fan of curry? Anybody a fan of curry? Because we got a hand clap for curry. Right on. There you go. When I first started eating it, me and my friend called it kryptonite chicken, because it's got this neon green glow to it. You might know what I'm talking about. And it's not like boneless chicken breasts. It's not like nuggets from McDonald's that are wrapped in sauce. It's like a chopped bird. It's got all kinds of stuff still attached to it. And so I try to pick out, the pieces with the most white meat, and it's safe enough for me. My mother-in-law, she's from Trinidad. She's been in the States since about the 70s, I believe, maybe even a little bit before that. She's lived here for a really long time. But Trinidad is still in her bones. It's still a part of her. She still thinks and calls Trinidad home. Even though she's been here for a ton of time, she still calls that island home, and it's still a part of her. It's in her DNA. When she was out gardening, she used to garden with a machete. No joke. Like, she's out there chopping. I mean, she was, you just backed up. You're just like, hey, you want some iced tea or lemonade or anything? I'll leave it over here. You continue to do your thing. When she talks to people from home, her island accent comes away. She's like, hey, girl, let me tell you something. Like, you can hear, I'm like, who's that? Where'd that come from? I'm going to fit him up good. Like, is that even her? And then she drops a down by the beach, boy. I'm like, I'm just kidding. I got to fit in a horn every once in a while. But you feel this islandness just kind of come out of her. Even though she's been here for such a long time, her home country, it starts to come out. And especially during the cold months of the year, you see this little twinkle in her eye where she longs for her home country. She misses the humid air. She misses the green jungle that she was born in. She misses that feeling, the food, the life that was in her heart. These people from her homeland. She misses that time and those people and that place where she is from. The writer of the book of Hebrews, he puts us in the same context. He puts us in the same story, this text of these Jewish believers. We believe that they're living in Italy. They're living in a distant country, probably because they were driven out due to persecution. We believe that there was persecution in the Jewish, like the Palestine region. And they were driven out of this place. If you know a little bit of history, in the year 70, the Jews started a war with Rome, and that's usually a bad idea. And so Rome come in and just destroyed the city of Jerusalem, tore down the temple. So prior to that time, somewhere around there, this group of Jewish believers had been driven out after Jesus was killed. The disciples, the apostles, are being killed and martyred. And so they're driven out. And we believe this group of Jewish believers are living in the area up close to Italy. They're in a foreign country. And so the writer of Hebrews is writing to them about this idea of being in a foreign land and longing for a distant country. You can imagine these Jewish believers in Italy, different food, different people. They're strangers, they're foreigners in another place, but they're longing for home. And so he uses this idea to talk about this concept of heaven, that there is a further distant country, a better land than the one you are in, but it's not here. You can't take a trip and walk and get to it. It's somewhere else. It's off in the distance. It's a heavenly country that God has prepared for us. Many of us, when we think about heaven, we think about fluffy clouds and chubby babies, right? Anybody have this picture? The grandmother have this picture somewhere, It's usually in the bathroom over top of a little bowl of potpourri. It's kind of, am I right? So weird. Many of us have this concept, this view of heaven that looks like this. It's very ethereal, and it's people laying on clouds, playing harps for some reason. Choirs of angels singing in the background. Maybe if you saw a movie depicting heaven, it helped you get a little some framework about what heaven looked like. I remember back in the 90s, Robin Williams came out with a movie. I think it was like What Dreams May Come. Is that what it was? And it really looked like heaven was kind of Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. That's what the director kind of wrote it as, and the person who wrote it sort of looked like that. But heaven hasn't always been thought of in these terms. Prior to in Israel's history, prior to the second temple that was built, Jews and Greeks alike, they viewed the afterlife as like just a darkness. That when you died, you ceased to exist, and you stepped out into a shadowy existence of nothing. There really wasn't anything out there. It was utter darkness. Everyone that died ceased to exist in anything that was light. Jews called this place Sheol, Sheol, and Greeks called it Hades. And Hades was just a nothingness. But as time progressed and as their theology of heaven and the afterlife started to progress, this idea of the afterlife started to take on some new shape and a new form as well. By the time of the Second Temple, all the way up into Jesus' time, they had formulated two paths after you died. There were people that were good in this life went to one destination, and the people that were bad in this life, when they died, they went to a separate destination. The Jews called the good place Abraham's bosom. It was paradise, or Abraham's bosom. We'll get into that in a second. And the Greeks continued to talk about Hades as the bad place, and they talked about sort of an off-distant land, like out in nowhere's land was this good place. It was no punishment there, so it was good because there wasn't anything bad. Well, for the Jews, this place called Abraham's bosom was sort of like paradise. If you ever been a middle school boy, when you hear the word bosom, you giggle inside, you know. So every time I heard that growing up in church, I had no idea the biblical background of this idea of Abraham's bosom. And I was reading this week trying to get my mind wrapped around it, and they said, you know, Abraham, the father of the faith, they viewed him sort of at like a big banquet table. See, the Jews, they didn't sit at a table like Westerners do, sit in a chair and they would eat like this. For Jews, they would recline. They would lay back and they'd have pillows and blankets around when they ate, and it was a very relaxing atmosphere. So the host of the meal would sit at this center place, what we would call a chair, but it was part of like a bench. They would sit in the center, and the guest of honor would sit to their right-hand side. And as they would recline, the guest of honor could sort of lean back on the host. He could lay on his chest. He could maybe have his arm wrapped around him like good friends. They would reclining together. They viewed the afterlife. If I lived good in this life, I can go to a place, it's like paradise, where Abraham, the father of the faith, is reclining, and I'm sitting at his right hand. That's what they viewed the afterlife like. When I was a kid, I remember growing up in church. I was about 7, 8 years old, and I would get cold in church, and my dad would give me his suit jacket. And my dad was a big dude, so I got this like size 55 suit coat on, and I'm this little scrawny kid, and I'm swimming in this jacket. You know, it was awesome. And he would pull me up on his lap, and he would wrap his big blue-collar arms and hands around me. And there was no other place in the world I would rather be than in that spot, because I was completely safe. There was no concern. There was no worries. There was probably halls in his little inside pockets, you know, the eucalyptus halls. And if I was hungry, I could eat something. If I was cold, he would warm me. Like if I was tired, I would just fall asleep in his arms, and I knew he would hold me. He would carry me to where I needed to go. In my father's arms was the best place I could be. And so for Jews, they said, when I die, if I do everything right here, I will go into Abraham's lap and into his arms, and I can lay on him, and I'm perfectly safe. The afterlife is where I want to be. It will be paradise. That's what they started to formulate as this idea of the afterlife. Well, when Jesus shows up, this is the prevailing thought. This is the theology of the afterlife. It is out there. The different groups of people believe differently about the afterlife, like the Sadducees. You hear them in Scripture. They didn't believe there was a resurrection or afterlife. It just ended. But the Pharisees, they believed that something would happen and they would move out into this next place. Well, Jesus comes along and he kind of changes the game on everything. But Jesus really only speaks of heaven about 6, maybe 8 times, depending on how you interpret some of the things that he said. He did not speak about heaven and hell really all of that much. He didn't talk about it nearly enough. He actually talked about money about twice as much as he talked about heaven and hell combined. Jesus was really specific about the things that he spoke of, and heaven was not really one of them. And if I could say this, and I'll sum it up as much as I can, and we'll get into more of Jesus' words and more about heaven in the next couple weeks, but if I could sum it up this way, all that Jesus spoke about heaven could be summed up really in 2 points. And the first was this: don't think of heaven as a future hope, but more, is it your hope? He made it very personal. He's like, yeah, heaven, the afterlife, it's out there, but don't be concerned too much about it being a future hope. You need to be concerned if it's your future hope. You really need to be concerned, are you going to be there? That was one of Jesus' points of emphasis. And the second is to don't think of heaven as a future reality. And again, this is not a quote. This is sort of a summation of ideas. Don't think of heaven as a future reality, but in faith, through faith, it's a current reality. Heaven starts to begin now. The resurrection happens now. He spoke of the kingdom. The kingdom is near. It's now. It's close to you. It's in you. It's happening all around us. He says that heaven is a place. Heaven is a place of treasure. Heaven is a place of joy and reward. Heaven is a place of justice where everything is put back in place. Heaven is a community. He speaks of heaven being a community. He says heaven is a place that he's going to prepare. And that's about all the specifics that he gives us about heaven. He does give a parable about Lazarus and the rich man. I think it's in Luke 16, where he speaks about the gap or the chasm between Lazarus being in a good place, being in paradise with Abraham, and the rich man being in a place of eternal torment, far away, and there was a chasm that couldn't be crossed. So there is some specifics there, but he doesn't really get too much into this idea of what heaven is. This is the concept of heaven at Jesus' time, all the way until about Revelation, where the Apostle John, he writes it like 70, 80, 90 AD, somewhere in there. Well, for those of us on this side of history, think about being in Jesus' shoes and his disciples and those that were following Christ on this side, without what the book of Revelation tells us about all that stuff, without Dante's Inferno really influencing the theology. What does the afterlife look like? How are we meant to live in the here, in the now? How are we meant to live with a concept of heaven that really we can't fit our minds, our hands around quite yet? What does it mean to us here? If it's more real than we know, and if we'll find out sooner than we think, there's some time between us here and then. We need to learn how to live in the here and now. So back to Hebrews, the writer is telling us in this context, he pens these words about heaven being a distant country, a far out place, and we are foreigners and strangers in this land. And so the first verse, he says, look, now faith is a confidence in what we hope for. It's an assurance in what we can't see. And this is what the ancients, they were commended for. And he goes from Abel down to Enoch, and he goes to Abraham and Isaac, and he talks about Sarah and Jacob and these people. Each of them, they lived by faith, one, but two, they were strangers and foreigners in the land that they were in. Not metaphorically, literally. Abraham had to leave his home country and go to a different one. He was a foreigner as he traveled. Isaac the same way. Jacob the same way. Sarah had to follow along. Abel, he didn't make it that far. He was a foreigner. He couldn't find a homeland. Every single one of these people, they were foreigners. They were strangers in their land. The Greek word that the writer uses, xenos, as a stranger, also meant a foreigner. It could also mean refugee. In some context, the word xenos for strangers also meant barbarian. If you were a foreigner living in a country that wasn't yours, it was a very humiliating experience. You were looked on with suspicion and contempt. Sometimes they would look at you with hatred. They would look and say, I can smell your country on you. You don't belong here. They never really truly fit into the place they were at. The xenos, they were strangers and foreigners. They were wanderers. They never truly had a home. All of the patriarchs of Israel's past, they were aliens in lands that were not theirs. They were nomads and wanderers and citizens of another country, but here. They were pilgrims passing through. Jesus himself, he shows up in the New Testament. He's a wanderer. Says he has no place to lay his head. He has no home to call his own. He's traveling from one town to the next, never settling down. He was a nomad, a stranger. For followers of Christ, for those of us in this room that say we are followers of Christ, this world will never truly feel like home. This world in which we live will never truly feel like home. There should be something on the inside of us as followers of Christ that really never gets comfortable, because there's a longing in place for another destination. There should be a longing for another place, a distant country, a better country, a longing for a city that hasn't been formed by the hands of man, but whose architect is God himself. We as followers of Jesus are wanderers. We too are sojourners and pilgrims just passing through this earth. It will never feel like, because heaven is our home. We are citizens of another country. The arms of our Father is where we long to be in his grasp. We are citizens of heaven. Well, the writer goes on, patriarch by patriarch, and great feat of faith, one after another. They all displayed faith, but they were all still wanderers. But this isn't the emphasis of what he is trying to get to. Really, the undercurrent of this 11th chapter, this faith chapter, is really about heaven. Verse 32, he continues on. He says, what more shall I say? I don't have time. I really don't have time to tell you about Gideon and Barak and Samson and David and Samuel and the prophets who through faith they conquered kingdoms, they administered justice and gained what was promised to them, who shut the mouths of lions, who quenched the fury flames, who escaped the edge of the sword, whose weakness was turned into strength, and who became powerful in battle and routed foreign armies. Women received back their dead raised to life again. How awesome does that sound, right? How amazing this life of faith really is. But don't get wowed by these stories, because the end of the chapter takes a very tragic turn. Like a skip in a record, the song changes, the tone of the writing changes, and he talks about living by faith is not always a good thing. It doesn't always turn out well. It doesn't always turn out the way that we would want it to. Any followers of Jesus know what I'm talking about. You leave church pumped up. Yes, by faith, I'm going to go do it. Things are going to go well, and you step out, and Monday morning punches you right in the nose, and you say, God, what happened? Where are you at? I'm living by faith, but it doesn't always work out the way that I thought. And he says, well, there were others, not the ones that we would know, not the ones that had their names in lights, not the ones who have books written about them with their names at the top. There were others who were tortured and refusing to be released so that they might gain an even better resurrection. Listen to the tone he's saying. This life may be difficult, but they were holding on because there was something better in the distance. There was something they were longing for. This faith that they had was for something they couldn't see quite yet. It was heaven. He says there were some, they refused to be released so that they might gain an even better resurrection. Some faced jeers and flogging and even chains and imprisonment. They were put to death by stoning. They were sawed in two. They were killed by the sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, persecuted, and mistreated. The world was not worthy of them. They were foreigners in a distant land, and they were mistreated because of that. These xenos, these foreigners and strangers and refugees and pilgrims, these barbarians in a foreign land, they were mistreated, and that foreign land is this blue sphere that's floating around the cosmos in which you and I call home. It was Earth. They were foreigners not of Italy. They weren't foreigners of Rome. They were foreigners in this planet. They were foreigners just like you and I, as followers of Christ, are foreigners, strangers, because this is not our home. Hopefully we don't face what they faced, but nonetheless, we are foreigners just like they are. They wandered in deserts and mountains, living in caves and holes in the ground. So don't get it twisted. Choosing a life of Christ, I'm not up here to sell you snake oil, and I'm not up here to tell you that everything's going to be peaches and cream. Runs through the sun. What's that field up north where there's like sunflowers everywhere? Everybody's profile picture turned into that like 2 weeks ago. What the heck is that? Like, did the rapture happen and everybody's, in heaven and that's what it looks like and they can still get to their Facebook? Like they got great connection? Like maybe only the Verizon users can, send photos back or something. I'm not up here to tell you that's what life is going to look like when you choose Jesus. Because if anybody tells you that it's all good, they're lying. They're selling you something. These are people who chose a life of faith. They chose to follow Christ, and it didn't end well in our estimation. Because we looked and we see that their life ended horribly. Some of them were tortured. Some of them were sawed in two. Some of them at this point were being used as sport. But they still live by faith. Why? Because they saw something off in the distance that was a better country. There's a longing deep in them that said, there's a better place off in the distance. I can't get there by foot, but I will get there. And it's a different journey. It's not this bus route. I can't take this. It's not going to take me there. The way in which I get from where I am to that place is living by faith here and now. by believing and being assured that that distant country exists, and I will step into it when this life ends. That's how I get from here to there. There were some who made it. There were some who experienced great things, and we write about them as fathers of the faith, and we rehearse all the things that they did. Then there were some who lived and it didn't end well, but all of them realized that they were foreigners in a distant country. They were strangers where they called home. They were refugees. They were pilgrims passing through from this place to the next. And the writer ends this chapter. He says, these were all commended for their faith, yet none of them received what had been promised. Since God had planned something better for us. Something better. No matter how good this life gets, there is something better. Doesn't matter how well you plan it out. Doesn't matter all the creature comforts you can have. There will always be something better. It's a distant country. It's heaven, the thing that God has prepared for us, together with us. It will be made perfect. For us to understand heaven, next few weeks getting into what it actually is and what actually is happening there, which is written for us to understand, we need to grasp a few things. That resurrection that we long to have begins now, but will fully come in fruition then. See, heaven is a now but not yet reality. For followers of Christ, heaven is a now but it's a not yet reality. Christians are to live with a longing, to live with a faith for something they can't quite see yet, a confidence and a hope that we don't see. The biggest thing for these members, these wanderers, these strangers, was heaven out in the distance. It's what kept them moving forward. We are to live with a longing as pilgrims passing through because we are citizens of another place. But what does living with longing look like? You might be thinking, Pastor Chris, this sounds really depressing. You're talking about people being salt and two, and I don't know if I want to sign up for that. Can I revoke my membership if that's the end of the game? What does living with longing look like? How do we know it's going to turn out good or bad? What does it look like for us to live with a longing? The chapters and verses weren't added to these scriptures until like 1,300 some years after it was written. So it's really one continuous scroll. And the end of 11 just bleeds right into 12. And the writer tells us how to live with longing as he continues, and he wraps it up right here at the end, and we'll do the same. He says in Hebrews 12, he says, so therefore, all that I just told you, in light of all the things that I just listed out, in light of how all these men have lived and these women have lived by faith, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, these people who have already gone on, possibly looking down and cheering us on like, hey, man, keep going. No, don't give up. Don't stop now. Keep moving. Keep going. Okay, you can walk for a few paces. You can take a minute and walk, but I want you to get back that jog. We got a destination. This is a 5K. You gotta keep going. This is a half marathon. Your feet feel like they're bleeding and your toes feel like they're broken. Now this is a marathon. You're gonna keep going. You can walk for a few. You can take a break, but you still got to keep going. There are people all around us, and they're cheering us on. Keep moving, keep going. Since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witness, let us throw off everything that hinders. Get rid of the excess. Just pull it off. You got a long way to go, and they're cheering you on. And the sin that so easily entangles us, let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer, the perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross. He scorned the shame. He sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. He's telling us what paradise looks like. Jesus is the one sitting at the right hand of God in a safe place. Consider him who endured such opposition for sinners so that you won't grow weary and won't lose heart. He says, look, you're living with a longing, but here's how I want you to do it. Number one, throw off the excess. You have baggage that's dragging you down, is trying to keep you from finishing the race. Not all things are created equal. There may be something that you're holding on to that's keeping you from that distant country, that's dragging you down and keeping you from moving forward. Maybe it's that job, that relationship, a substance, a hobby, that thought pattern, those people, that place. Make no mistake. There are things in your life right now that hinder you, that deter you, that impede you from your destiny. Not all things are created equal. I may have a particular thing in my life and it doesn't bother me, but that particular thing in your life would keep you from moving forward in Christ. He says, so throw off the sin that so easily entangles you. It's like tying your shoelaces together and trying to run a marathon. You won't go that far. There are things in your life that you need to let go of, get them out of the way. So the writer says, look, in light of those people, in light of the race that they ran, making it to the finish line, that distant country, that better place, that heavenly city, we too need to drop the excess, everything that keeps us from moving forward. The second thing he tells us we need to do is to run. 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 Let me tell you, there's someone in this room, and I know it because I felt it even this past week. It felt like just giving up, stopping. Man, this is too much. I can't do this anymore. Anybody ever felt that before? Maybe every Monday for you. I can't do this anymore. This is too much. Maybe you get in another argument with your spouse or your girlfriend or your friend in a relationship. There's some kind of wall that you hit and you step back. You're like, all right, this is, I just can't do this. I can't do it anymore. I just can't even try. I don't know what to do. If this is what the future looks like, I don't want a future with you or at this place or in this thing. The writer tells us, no. I know what you're feeling like. Just take a deep breath, in, out, take a sip of water, and then get back on your feet and keep moving. Because the race is too important to give up now. Your marriage is too important to give up on each other. You have to keep trying. The destination is too important. There's a distant country and there's a cloud of witnesses looking out on the horizon saying, I don't see Chris yet, but I know he's coming. I don't see Robin yet. I don't see Dan yet. I don't see Cal yet, but I know that they're going to come. Come on, baby. Don't stop now. Keep moving. Keep running. Don't give up on yourself or your marriage or your kids or your job or your community or your city or another race. Don't give up now. Keep running. Keep moving. Believe the best. Have faith in what you can't see yet. Keep moving. I got a buddy who's a runner, and he's not able to run as long as he used to. And the Baltimore Marathon was yesterday. Baltimore Marathon, anybody run the Yeah. I see a couple people shaking like, you're crazy, bro. How about no? And he has this really cool Instagram post. He said, hey, for all my runner friends that are out there, he said, let Washington Street go by quicker. Let the bridge coming over Hanover be longer. Let the scenery that you see coming across the park be greener. And he listed all these legs of the journey, and some of them are hills going like this, and some of them are hills coming down like that. Some have the most beautiful scenery of our city out in the distance. And it was this encouragement, like there are going to be places where you want to stop. He says, keep moving. Just keep charging along. Keep your feet one in front of the other. Keep going. In this life, you're going to face hills that look like you can never make it. You'll look at this mountain that stands in front of you and looks like it gets higher the further you look up. Don't stop moving. Keep running. The destination ahead of you is more important than the comfort of sitting down. So don't stop. The writer says, man, throw off all the excess and keep moving ahead. And he says, keep your eyes fixed. And not fixed on the finish line, not fixed on heaven, on Jesus. I grew up in church. There was song after song about how awesome heaven was going to be. Some glad morning when this life is over, going bottom, I will fly away. And they all had this boom chuck to them. I don't know where country gospel, I can't find it in the Bible, but country gospel is heavenly somehow, you know. when we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. I mean, it was like constant heaven songs. Am I know what I'm talking about? I mean, you may not grow up in it, so God bless you. But I was like, this is morbid. All we sing about is dying, like, is anybody else seeing this? Like, this is weird. And I always felt like heaven was the finish line. If I could just make it there, I'll be good. If I can just like keep my church membership until I die, I'm gonna get into heaven. Like, I've got a golden ticket. I got a golden ticket. Like, I'm gonna get there, and I'm like, man, that was miserable. I hope there's no country gospel up here in heaven. So we got another genre. I thought heaven was the finish line. Heaven's not the finish line. Jesus is the finish line. It's a person. It's not a place. We're going to get into this next week. Heaven is not a place where you get to just sit back like, woo, oh man, woo, we made it. Someone bring me something cool and refreshing, I don't know why I'm laying here so long. The point's over, but I'm just still laying here. This feels good. Heaven isn't the place where we get to, and finally we just throw our hands, oh yeah, that's it. No. Heaven is the place where Jesus is. And that's where we're running to. That's why we are running. We're running into the arms of our Father Jesus. That's the finish line. And so the writer, let's assume it's Paul, he doesn't say, hey, and keep your eyes fixed on the distant country, or on heaven, because it's going to be awesome. I mean, there's fluffy clouds, chubby babies, St. Peter's at the door, he's carding dudes, like, hey, velvet rope and all, like, yeah, you can come in, you can come, no, I don't like the way you look, get out of here. It's awesome. Just tell him that I sent you, tell Peter that Jesus sent you, it's going to be great, this place is going to be awesome. There's choirs of angels singing, and there's another tent that's got a little heavier music over here in case, and there's a country gospel place, if you want to get there. This place is awesome. I mean, it's awesome. It's amazing. There's streets of gold, and not like you could spend it anyway, but if you wanted to, it's there, and this place is great. No. He doesn't say that. He doesn't say keep running because the place you're going to get to is amazing. He says keep running because the person you are running into the arms of is the best thing that has ever happened. It's the best person the universe has ever known. It's Jesus himself. That's what we're running for. And so if your idea of heaven could be the best place in the world, even if Jesus wasn't there, you have a wrong definition of what heaven is. Because the writer says we need to keep our eyes fixed on him. He is the finish line. It's into the arms of Jesus himself that you and I are running. It's funny how often Jesus becomes a means to our own ends. How many times did your prayer life start with, hey, Jesus, can you help me with fill in the blank? God, I would love for you if you fixed this. Can you help me understand? Can you do this for them? Can you do that? Isn't it funny how Jesus becomes something that helps us get our life better? What if we reverse that and say, God, if you can just help me get through this life, doing your will for those around me and to the places I am so that I can get to you. Because you is where I want to be. If this thing doesn't get fixed, it's going to be tough, but I'm still going to move along. If this relationship doesn't work out, that would be terrible. But you know what? I'm moving towards you. That's where I'm going. I don't need you to fix this life. I need this life to get me to you. So thank you for my family. Thank you for the broken relationship. Thank you for the kids I have. Thank you that I have 3 tires that still have air in them, Thank you that I have a job. It makes me miserable, but thank you for it anyway. Let's not let Jesus become a means to that end. He is the end, and everything else is a means to him. He is the center of heaven. So how comfortable are you? How comfortable am I? I'm not up here preaching to get rid of all of your creature comforts, because I'm getting the iPhone 7 like tomorrow. I like this earth. You know, I like life. I like to have technology that works. That's why I don't buy a Samsung. You know, oh man, I know. I couldn't stay away from it. I said it and it's like, came out of my mouth. I don't want my phone to catch on fire. You so hide behind a different phone. I digress. I'm ending. I promise I'm ending. I'm not preaching that this making life more comfortable is a bad thing. No. I believe God wants us to have comforts. I believe he wants us to have those things. But if we don't have them, it doesn't mean we're out of his will. You know, there will be times in this life that are uncomfortable. But do you long for a better country? Not a better life here, but do you long for a better country where there isn't sickness and cancer and pain and disease? Do you long for a place where there isn't rape and murder and sex trafficking of children? Do you long for a place that doesn't have the ills of this world, where there isn't death and decay, where death isn't guaranteed, but life is the only thing that's guaranteed because of Christ? Do you long for that city, that distant country? Do you long for that place out there in the distance? Or are you just asking God to make this life better and more comfortable here and now? Is that what Christ has become? Because that's not the gospel that we see. So the writer of the Hebrews says, man, things may be good. You may achieve certain things in this life. You may see the things that you hope for come about. And that's awesome. Or you may not see it. You may die and the promise may never be fulfilled. Either way, throw off the excess. The sin that's trying to wrap you up and keep you from getting there. Run as hard as you can and keep your eyes on Jesus. He's the author, the finisher. He is the creator of a distant country, a heavenly city that wasn't made by human hands, but whose architect is God the Father himself. And it's a place without tears, without pain, without sickness, without disease. It's a place where cancer has no place. It's a city in which there is no rape and murder. Each person is viewed in the image of God himself, our creator. It's a place that is perfect and is just and it is good, where Jesus is king. It's a place without divorce. It's a place without relational hurt. It's a place where things are mended and brought together. It's a place where Jesus is king and we all bow our knees to him. It's a perfect place. Do you long for it? Do you long to be there? That's what heaven is.